Welcome back, and today we have a special edition preview of the Louisville Cardinals versus Indiana Hoosiers college football game. It's a week 3 game, and I'm your host, Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports, and I also have my co-host next to me, Austin Williams of Sports Talk with Austin, and we cannot wait to break down this game, two of our favorite teams in college football, and definitely can't wait to get in with and talk about this game. What are your first thoughts about this, Austin?
Yes, for everyone watching on Jeffrey and mine's channel, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited about this preview, especially since the fact Louisville, Indiana football don't get to play as much as, other teams do, but looking forward to it. And, we got a lot of things to discuss. And, maybe, who knows, maybe, who knows what's going to come of it. But it should be fun, and I can't wait.
I definitely can't wait as well. And ironically, Indiana and Louisville have only played 2 times in their both teams' histories, and Indiana's 2-0. They won 2 times in the 80s against Louisville, so maybe the third time will be the charm for the Cardinals. But the head coaching battle is going to make a big difference, and these are 2 coaches that have coached against each other several times. Jeff Brom, when he was at Purdue, played Tom Allen in the Indiana Hoosiers 5 times, and Jeff Brom went 4-1 against the Indiana Hoosiers and Tom Allen. And right now, first-year head coach at Louisville for Jeff Brom, Tom Allen in his 7th season at Indiana. But who do you think will win the coaching battle in this game, Austin? Because it could go either way.
Now, there's some interesting history to this, obviously. Like you just mentioned, Indiana, Purdue played each other multiple times. And, I think it's important to point out, Jeff Brom, obviously when he got to Purdue, they weren't very good. But he was able to turn them around and make them into something. And Tom Allen kind of did the same thing with Indiana there for a bit. So both these guys have a history of making programs into something, whether it's getting them to bowls or as Purdue got named, the Spoilermakers, because they seemed to beat all the big teams when it mattered for whatever reason. But I think when it comes to this coaching battle, I think Jeff Brom's a better offensive-minded coach. He knows how to get an offense going. But for me personally, I think Tom Allen would have the edge when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And that's what kind of worries me a little bit. Because, yes, you can have all the flashy offense in the world. Like, I know this isn't the NFL, but look at the Kansas City Chiefs, for instance. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, Super Bowl 54, put a Tampa 2 defense on a speedy Tyreek Hill, was able to shut all that down. And we've got a bunch of speedy receivers as well. And how that correlates is, what if Tom Allen's like, oh, what if we draw up something like that? What if we make a defense where, oh, Plummer, you're going to have to beat us with someone else. And, he could force him into a couple of turnovers. But it also works the other way as well in terms of this coaching matchup. Because the offense can sometimes outdo the defense. Both these guys know each other so well because of Purdue and Indiana. You would like to think that you would want to give the edge to Jeff Brom just for the fact of he's beaten Tom Allen more, like you've mentioned, Jeffrey, and pointed out. But you also look at it from the perspective this is Jeff Brom's first year at Louisville, Tom Allen, 7 years at Indiana. You would think Tom Allen would have a little more experience just because he's been with this team longer, and that Jeff Brom is still getting to know this team. But I think, honestly, for me personally, if I'm being unbiased and put my perspective on it, I think Tom Allen will win the coaching matchup just for the fact of he knows Indiana a little bit better than maybe Brom knows us a little more. So I think Tom Allen will win the coaching battle, but I think it'll be closer than people think. It's not going to be, oh, Brom's not going to know how to call the game. But I think Allen's just going to know how to call a better game because he knows the team very well.
I mean, you made a lot of great points there. I think that overall, Jeff Brom he seems to really know the game better than Tom Allen in certain aspects of it, like when to call timeouts, certain personnel to put on the field at certain points of the game. I've seen Jeff Brom do certain things like, especially on the offensive end. Like you said, on offense, he is a great coach. He knows how to coach that side of the ball, especially when he has talent, which he does with Louisville. They have speedy running backs and receivers. They have a lot of talent. Maybe not as much talent as some of the best Purdue teams that he had because it is his first year, but he is going to build up that talent at Louisville. And I do think that as a gamesmanship head coach, he's probably ahead of Tom Allen. But like you said, with Tom Allen having that continuity of being at Indiana for 7 seasons, knowing the team, granted, they have like 25 transfers on the team. So, I mean, a lot of the teams knew. It still helps that he's in the same spot and he's been coaching the same way for a while. And he is a great defensive-minded coach. So it's going to be interesting with the offensive dynamic of Jeff Brom versus the defensive aspect of Tom Allen. It's always been interesting to watch. But now that Jeff Brom's with a new team, his first year, it's going to make it a lot harder on him to get that done. I do feel Tom Allen's going to have the edge, like you said, as well, because he's been in Indiana for 7 years, Jeff Brom's first season at Louisville. But I think comparing the two coaches head-to-head, I would give the coaching battle, if he was still at Purdue, to Jeff Brom. But since it's in his first year at Louisville, I would give the edge to Tom Allen by a little bit as well.
Now, the interesting thing about it is, let me ask you this, Jeffrey. Staying on the kind of the same path here, who do you think needs to win this game more? Obviously, as we'll get to our score predictions later on in this video, but as far as coaches, who do you think needs this more going forward? Do you think Brom needs it to continue to build his success? Or is Tom Allen, because of all the talk of, he doesn't start winning a little more, Indiana may say, bye, Tom Allen, we can find someone else. Who do you think needs that in that aspect? Who needs it more?
There's an argument to be made because it's Jeff Brom's first season that he needs to get off to a roaring start to have the Louisville fan base on his side. Like if you start out rough, lose a game that a lot of the fan base does not think that you should lose, they could get upset and kind of possibly turn on Jeff Brom a little bit, something you don't want early on in his tenure. But yes, Tom Allen by far needs this win more because Jeff Brom's not going to get fired in year one, even if he goes 4-8 or 5-7, which Louisville's not going to do, especially because of their schedule. Tom Allen needs this game because even if he doesn't win, he's not going to get fired, but it's another game, especially if Indiana does not perform well. It's going to stack up another performance that Indiana underperformed in, and Tom Allen has had 2 rough seasons, and the last 2 years were not great. The 2 years before that were awesome for Indiana, but yes, I think Tom Allen needs it more. Jeff Brom, it'd be great to have this win, but he doesn't need it as badly as Tom Allen needs it.
I agree. I 100% agree with you on that. I think obviously fan bases can be fickle sometimes. But as far as our 2 fan bases are concerned, I think if we lose this game, I think there will be a little disappointment around it because Indiana's kind of like, when it comes to football, they're like little brother. Like, you're supposed to beat them up. Like, now if this was basketball, that's another conversation, which Louisville could play Indiana in basketball this year, but that's not what this is about. But I agree. I think Tom Allen does need this a little bit more because I feel like, in the sense, some Indiana fans have began to turn on Tom Allen even before this year. I don't know if you felt that way personally, but I've heard some speculation and seen some people like, Tom Allen can't coach. He's not good enough. He needs to go down a level, which is crazy to think. But that's just one of those things that's like, the dude's been in Indiana 7 years. He wouldn't been here as long as he has if he couldn't coach. Like, let's get the working straight there. But as far as who needs this game more, it's definitely Tom Allen. Jeff Brom, I think he can recover from this, because Satterfield's done it, Petrino, on down, they've all had bad losses and they've all recovered from it. Tom Allen is kind of at that point where he may not be able to recover from something like this if the fan base is kind of expecting a win here.
Especially if it's not a competitive game and Indiana just does not look very impressive in the game. But something that is going to determine who wins this game is going to be the quarterback battle. Jack Plummer, a guy that was at Purdue for several seasons under Jeff Brom, so he's familiar with his head coach, and he had some success at Purdue until he got supplanted by Aiden O'Connell at the quarterback position. Then Jack Plummer goes to Cal, does not have a lot of success at Cal. That offensive line did not do him any favors, but now he reunites with Jeff Brom, transfers to Louisville, and he is a veteran quarterback, whereas Taven Jackson, this is his first official start where he is guaranteed as the starter at Indiana. He started last week, but he was still in that quarterback competition with Brendan Sorsby. So you've got a veteran in Jack Plummer. You've got a young redshirt freshman in Taven Jackson who has a lot of talent. But who do you think is going to win the quarterback battle in this game, Austin?
So, for me, this is very interesting. You've got the tale of two quarterbacks. So, let's compare. Who do you think, Jeffrey, has the better arm talent? If we were comparing off these kind of skills, who would you say had the better arm talent, Taven or Jack? Because me personally, I would say Plummer does, but there's other people that may say Taven has the better arm. What do you think, Jeffrey?
It's a really interesting question because I feel like Jack Plummer has an underrated arm. I mean, it's not an explosive arm, but he has the ability to put the ball in all the spots on the field, and his arm is very underrated. It actually can go farther than some people think, but I haven't seen a lot of Taven Jackson. He's so young. I've only seen him in a couple games, but he's had a couple throws where he threw it about 60 yards down the field. So even though I would say that Jack Plummer, probably a lot of people would answer him right now just because they've seen him longer and he's, been a veteran college quarterback for many years. But I think in the future, Taven Jackson will have, better arm talent. But he's just so young that it's hard for a lot of people to answer that. I would probably say Taven just by a little bit from what I've seen in the small dose, but Jack Plummer's a lot more to go off of. So it's probably him for now.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And the reason why I brought that question to the forefront is because both these quarterbacks have a little trouble with accuracy. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, Taven and the small sample sizes we've gotten of him, they put him in there for more read options and speed options and all that, as they use Brendan Sorsby to throw the ball more. Jack, the thing with him is that drives me nuts and gets me a little worried that may cost us this game, is that if we're not able to run the ball and set up play action like we need to, he can sometimes make unjustified errors. I mean, look at the Georgia Tech game, that first half. It was 28-13. Georgia Tech was getting home. He threw the pick to end the half. And I was like, this is not a good start. I see why Cal just upped and got rid of him. I was like, Cal, please take me back. But then Jeff Brom, back into the coaching battle, he knows how to scheme up an offense. He settled him down. He was like, okay, let's get this play action going. Let's get this run game working. And, Jamal Thrash, which he's a speedy guy. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He was a big reason why we hung on and won that game. But the thing that's concerning is the point of it is Jack is sometimes inaccurate at the worst times. Like if he's not calm and got a clean pocket, he can sometimes be throwing passes in triple coverage, and you're like, why are you throwing that? And as a Louisville fan, a diehard Louisville fan, we've had a lot of great quarterbacks. We've been blessed. Teddy Bridgewater, Lamar Jackson, the first two that come to mind, who had a heck of an arm and accuracy to go with it. But with Plummer, he can be a little questionable. As Taven, we've seen, in his little sample size, when he throws, he's not as confident, which that may be something that comes with time because we got to remember, Taven's only, I believe, a sophomore, correct? Or is he a freshman?
He's a redshirt freshman, so he technically would be. He's a sophomore in academics, but because of the fact he redshirted at Tennessee, then he's still a freshman in eligibility, but he's a redshirt freshman.
Okay, and Jack Plummer is a senior, so the experience level is different. Maybe Taven grows into his arm. Maybe, maybe that's something with the quarterback coach that they kind of work on. Be like, hey, just set your feet. Be calm. Kind of, get a little poise about him. And that's one thing that, I'm starting to learn about Jack Plummer. He's starting to gain a little poise as that he didn't show at Cal. Like, obviously, me and you being diehard football fans, we've watched him in Cal, Pac-12 after dark at 10:30 at night when everyone should be asleep. But As far as it concerns this, at Cal, he didn't show that poise as much. You got him under pressure. It could be a little troublesome. But here, I think a lot of it is because he's back with Jeff Brom. They know each other so well. He's able to calm him down a little easier. I think a lot of quarterbacks, if you get the right coach, that could be the way it works. And maybe that's what Taven needs. Maybe he needs that right coach or someone to push the right button for him to calm down and understand, hey, we're not asking you to be Patrick Mahomes here. We just want you to do the right thing. I don't want to say call it a game manager, but just do your job, And I think, when it comes to the quarterback battle, it's going to be who makes the least mistakes first. Because obviously obviously Jack, we have more sample size, has been known to turn over the ball a little too much. Taven, we don't know if he's got a turnover issue. Hopefully for Indiana fans, he doesn't. Hopefully he just needs to learn how to throw. But as far as this quarterback battle, it's going to come down to who's more poised, who makes the first mistake, and who just plays overall better. Because they're equal in a lot of ways. But if I had to say who was going to win this, I would say Plummer, just for the fact of I think he has a better O-line than Taven does, and he has a little better receiving core, and he's with a coach that he knows a little bit better. Which, if Tom Allen sticks around and Taven sticks around, they may get to know each other really well in a couple years, and that may be the same scenario with them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you look at Jack Plummer when he was at Purdue, especially that last season when he was fighting for the job with Aiden O'Connell. You could tell he was just a bit tense. He was trying not to make mistakes so he would keep the job, and he ultimately lost the job. And that's what's tough when you're in a quarterback battle. Competition's great, but some people can't handle under pressure. Not saying Jack Plummer couldn't, but he just ultimately lost the job. When he went to Cal, he was never given a chance. The offensive line was not getting the job done. He was getting sacked left and right, and he was throwing picks left and right because he just wasn't getting protected. Like you said, Louisville's offensive line is a lot better than Cal's, and they have much better weapons on the outside than Cal, so that helps out Plummer tremendously. And the fact that him and Jeff Brom have that connection, I think is going to help Jack Plummer play a lot better. The thing that's concerning, though, is that Jack Plummer's stats to start the season, he's 34 of 53 for 494 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 picks. He's already thrown 3 picks in just 2 games. That's not great. And Indiana's defense is probably the best defense that Louisville has faced so far this season. Georgia Tech's defense had their moments, but Indiana's defense is much better. And granted, Ohio State's offense wasn't as explosive as it was last year when they played Indiana in week 1, but that was a 23-3 game. And Indiana held Indiana State, an FCS opponent, granted, to under 100 total yards. So Indiana's defense, if they can get Jack Plummer to, force the ball a little bit, they can maybe pick him off a couple times and give, Indiana a shot in this game. And with Taven Jackson, I mean, he's 19 of 26 for 260 yards, no touchdowns. He does have a rushing touchdown. He has no picks either. So that's a good thing. Against Ohio State, though, he didn't really have a chance to throw the ball. He might have thrown a pick in that game, but it was kind of a deal where they were trying to make it where he wouldn't make mistakes. I think to keep his confidence up against Indiana State, they let him air it out a bit, and against an FCS opponent, he did, and he had some nice throws. But now you're playing Louisville. They've got a better defense than Indiana State. Probably nowhere near as good as Ohio State's, though. So will Taven Jackson be confident in his first true start with no quarterback competition? I think he's going to be somewhat poised, but he's still so young that I would have to lean Plummer. Now, I think that the quarterback that's going to make more mistakes is probably Jack Plummer, but with all the weapons he has, the chemistry with Brom, and the O-line, I would give the edge to him. If Taven Jackson was older, though, I'd probably give the edge to Jackson. But Plummer has to probably be the winner of the quarterback battle. But if Taven Jackson does outperform Jack Plummer in this game, that would spell some doom for the Cardinals.
Yes, I agree. And that, like you said, all great valid points. I would like to bring this up, though. Do you think, now we talked about who needs this game more for Tom Allen and Jeff Brom. Same question to pose for here. In terms of looking at it through the quarterback's lenses, who do you think is going to get more scrutiny if they don't win this game? Is Jack Plummer or is it going to be Taven? Because you sometimes look at it and say, Jack's been here a while. But guess what? He lost to Indiana He's no good anymore. Time to bench him. Possibly if we don't get the job done. But you look at Taven, he's so young that they may let him off with a pass. But there's also, they see so much potential in him. They're like, do more with him, do better. In terms of looking at it through their lenses, who do you think needs this game more?
Yeah, I would have to go with the exact same answer that I gave when I was evaluating Jeff Brom and Tom Allen. It's the one that's been there longer as a starting quarterback. And Jack Plummer, he's the veteran. He should, be able to lead this team to a win because he's been a starting quarterback in college football for like 4 or 5 seasons. So he's a veteran. He's got that experience. If Taven Jackson doesn't play well, you can just chalk it up to an experience. Like you said, give him a pass. You would like for him to perform well because that would really bode well for the future for Indiana. If Taven Jackson's going out there and balling out, it would give a lot of Indiana fans hope that possibly he's going to be the guy for years to come and Indiana's going to improve in the future. So if he doesn't play well, it will kind of dim Indiana fans' hope in that regard with Taven Jackson. But I don't think it would make it where Indiana fans have no hope in him because he has one bad game and he's so young. They'll probably give him a pass. With Jack Plummer, I mean, this is also for his possible NFL hopes. I mean, if he wants to have any shot to play in the NFL, he's got to have a good season. And losing games like this and having, 2 or 3 interceptions in Indiana would just not look good for him. And it would probably not give him a great chance of getting to the next level. So it's a lot more important for Jack Plummer. And I would argue it's more important for, Louisville that he plays well because he's probably one of the most important players on the entire team. I know the quarterback position is for most teams, but if Jack Plummer is turning the ball over, that's just going to completely, not ruin Louisville's chances of winning the game, but it will hamper them for sure. So I would go with Jack Plummer for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do. I agree. I agree with you 100%, and I think we're going to find out this Saturday who wins the battle. But I'm glad you brought up the defensive side and the turnovers and brings us to the next great segue. How about our key offensive and defensive players in this game? Obviously, there's a lot of talent on both sides in this game, and I'm looking forward to what is to come. So, Jeffrey, let's start with the key offensive players for Indiana, and then I will transition into Louisville's key offensive players.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm looking forward to watching both teams on both sides of the ball because there is talent there. I would go for Indiana. I mean, it's a cliche at this point, but Jalen Lucas pops off the page because that guy can just run. He has quick speed. He runs like a 4.4. He's one of the fastest guys in college football, and he's really small, 5'9", 170 pounds. It's going to be really hard for the Louisville defense to slow him down. If you can get him in the backfield, if you can find a way to get a rush on the D line and get to him, it makes him very ineffective. But if he can get to the outside, he's running down that field 20, 30 yards. So he's a really good player. Cam Camper at wide receiver for Indiana is a guy, he's a little banged up, but he should play in this game. He's Indiana's best receiver by far. He's got great size, 6'2", 6'3", 210 pounds, and he was Indiana's leading receiver last year before he tore his ACL. Unfortunately, that hurt Indiana's, receiving core late in the year, but he's back. He should play in this game. He is a little dinged up, like I said before, but if he plays, I think he'll have a big impact in this game because Taven Jackson was really connecting with him. I'd even go with wide receiver Omar Cooper as well. He was a breakout player, redshirt freshman at 7 receptions for 101 yards against Indiana State. Granted, the opponent, but I think that he's another guy that could help out in the receiving core, especially if Cam Camper is somehow scratched from this game. He cannot play. On defense for Indiana, I feel like Aaron Casey at linebacker and Andre Carter at defensive end, both players are going to be key to slowing down Louisville's run game. And then I would think someone in the back end like Jameer Johnson at safety or Kobe Minor at corner would help try to slow down Louisville's speedy wide receivers. Those are some of Indiana's key offensive and defensive players.
Now, for my side of the ball, we'll start with the offense. Obviously, I've mentioned him a couple times. Jamari Thrash. He is like Jalen Lucas. He's got some speed on him. He's really talented. And if we like to throw him a lot of screens, I think if Indiana's safeties and corners, if they're not up for the challenge, it might be ball game for Indiana. And that's not me being a homer about it. That's just the honest truth. If you watch the Georgia Tech tape, what beat Georgia Tech? Just go back and watch that. Plummer, the run game, but Jamari Thrash catching it out of the backfield, Georgia Tech couldn't tackle him. I mean, run after catch, he's a monster. I think he's gonna affect a lot of defenses, not just Indiana's, but going forward. Like the ACC is gonna have to deal with him. You know, so I think that's one offensive player. He's a game changer. You know, kind of like Jalen Lucas with the Hoosiers. You know, they're both Tyreek Hill like in terms of speed. You know, obviously you may say Lucas has maybe got more of the size and weight to him. I mean, Thrash does, but Lucas may have more speed on him. But that's neither here nor there. Another one, running back Juwan Jordan. He's a big back, kind of Derrick Henry like. He's going to be a guy, if we plan on having any success going forward, especially in this game, as he gets a nice start. And, you know, obviously we haven't had very many running backs that have fumbling trouble, which, knock on wood, that doesn't happen this Saturday. But Juwan Jordan, he's a big back. He's going to be hard to bring down. And, you know, you brought up Aaron Casey. I hope he's up for the challenge because he's going to get to see a lot of him. And if Aaron Casey wants to get to Jack Plummer, he's going to have to stop that big back in the backfield. And Juwan Jordan, and you know, he may shock you, but once he gets out in that open field, he's gone. Like, if you can get him a good block, he's hard to bring down, and he's gone. And obviously, Jack Plummer, obviously, for us, is a big key because everything starts and ends with him. If he's throwing picks and getting sacked, you might as well wrap it up for the day. Because as good as defenses are, sometimes they can't overcome it. I mean, it's just one of those things. Like Utah this past weekend against Baylor, they were able to overcome that bad quarterback play, so to speak. But not always can happen. And then obviously our offensive line. You know, right tackle Eric Miller, left tackle Tyler Willie. Those are the two guys, you know, the left and rights that's got to come off watch the edge guys. You know, our entire offensive line, we just need to get that run game cooking. We need to force Indiana to rotate players in and out. We need to beat them down and keep their explosive offense off the field. But then as for the defensive side, middle linebacker Jalen Alderman. Now, this is interesting. The reason why he's very important, Taven Jackson likes to use his feet a lot. He's more than likely going to be the spy. So he's going to have the job of making sure Taven stays in that pocket. Because if Taven gets loose, it could be trouble. You know, and it would suck that if we get beat by Taven with his legs. Like, you can handle it if a quarterback beats you with their arm. You get used to that. But if he just starts taking off on you and getting 5 to 10 yards each time and setting Indiana up in short yardage, it's a long day for the defense. But Jalen Alderman, he's definitely going to be a big key factor in determining, you know, whether we win or lose this game because he'll have the most important job. Obviously, strong safety Josh Mickens, he's going to have the assignment of guarding Lucas, you know, and Campers, he's going to have the assignment. He always gets the best receiver. I think he's going to be the biggest factor. You know, he takes on the challenge. If you're beating him, then you got something going. And then obviously the defensive line. Can they pressure Taven? Can they make him throw off the spot? Can they make him step into defenders and make him throw? Obviously, defensive end Ashton Gilliton, nose tackle Desmond Tell. Those are some guys off the defensive line that I think can be impacting key players. But overall, you know, this is one of these things that people don't realize. Looking at it, Louisville and Indiana have a lot of the same thing in common. You know, we both got some speedy receivers. We both got quarterbacks who can play but have their own problems. It's not as far-fetched, you know, as people say, oh, the talent gap between Louisville and Indiana is wide. It's not as wide as people think. We both just listed off great offensive players, defensive players. It's not as wide as people think. It's not like it's Ohio State, Indiana, or Louisville, Clemson. It's not like that. It's more closer than people think. But this is all going to be interesting because there's all these players that are going to factor in. But it all comes down once again to the coaches and quarterbacks ultimately win the game. These players can only do so much at their position. Now, let me ask you this, Jeffrey. In terms of the players that we listed off, from our perspective, from the Louisville side, who scares you the most on the offensive defensive side of the players I listed? So I've got a couple that scare me for Indiana. Jalen Lucas, obviously, he scares me because if he starts slipping tackles and we just can't tackle and he starts going, good luck. I just may turn off the TV and say be done with it. But go ahead, Jeffrey.
Oh, I mean, definitely. I think one of the most underrated things is talking about how talented both of these teams are. A lot of people will look at these two teams and say they're not very talented, but they actually do have some really good players. Thrash from Louisville, he stands out because if Indiana's defense does not watch out for him, he's going to be running all over the place. Plummer can get him the ball, and he's just going to go for 50 yards. So, yeah, I'm definitely worried about him at wide receiver. Jordan at running back, he is a really big back, and I think that he's going to have some success against Indiana. I think the D-line for Indiana is much better, so they will slow him down, but he's still going to get some yards because he's that good of a player. So those are definitely guys I'm worried about, at least on the offensive end for the Louisville Cardinals. And on defense, like that middle linebacker you mentioned earlier, and I'm also a bit worried about Storm Duck as well. The North Carolina transfer, that guy is a really good player, so you do not want Taven Jackson throwing his way. So again, both these teams, like you said, they do not have a wide talent gap. Louisville is the more talented team, I would say, but it's not by much. Both teams have some good talent. The portal helped in that regard, but this is a fairly competitive matchup, at least on the talent.
Yes, and for Indiana, for me, obviously Lucas, Campers, I've mentioned both of them. They're two very good players, and Lucas has potential first-round talent. I don't think that's a far-fetched thing to say. He's got the speed, maybe the size, maybe turns teams off, so to speak, if that's the right way of looking at it, but I think teams will like that speed, especially if you play with a great quarterback. But, you mentioned Aaron Casey. I watched him opening weekend. That dude he's something. He has got a nose for the football. And I don't know why he hasn't left for the NFL yet, because he's got the talent. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if he's had some injury history that maybe has kept him back, because he is a senior. What is it about him that he hasn't left yet? Is it just because he's a guy that wasn't very high in the stock, or because he stands out big time when it comes to your defense? He scares me. I'm afraid to run his way.
Yeah, he's a really good player. I think part of it is because of the fact that he was behind Cam Jones and Micah McFadden the last couple of years. For whatever reason, Indiana the last 5 years has had great middle linebackers. Micah McFadden's playing for the Giants right now, starting middle linebackers. He was really good in Indiana. Cam Jones is playing with the Chiefs. He was a really good linebacker, and then now Aaron Casey's getting his shot. I just feel like that he was just behind guys that were more experienced than him, and now that he's gotten his shot, learning behind those really solid guys, it's made him a better player as well, and now he's really breaking out onto the scene as a solid player in his own right that has NFL potential like those guys. So I think that's a big reason. If he had been able to play from the beginning as a younger player, he probably would have been already in the NFL by now, to your point.
Now, I'm glad now we could transition into this. Not a lot of people, obviously you talk about the offense, you talk about the defense, you talk about the quarterbacks, coaches, but what about those special teams? Because not a lot of people realize special teams can win or lose you a game. And how about the turnover battle? We've mentioned that throughout this video. That's going to be a big key. But I want to start off by focusing on the special teams. How confident, Jeffrey, are you in Indiana's special teams? if it comes down to a last-second field goal or, there's 1 second left and you need a big punt return or a kick return, how confident are you in the Hoosiers in getting that done?
It's a great question. I mean, if we watched the Bills and the Jets were able to win on a punt return for a touchdown. So, again, to your point, they play a massive role, special teams do. So, I would be pretty confident in Indiana. I think the only things that I do not like about the special teams is, for whatever reason, Indiana on kickoffs, they've had a couple of them go out of bounds. So, the other team gets the ball out at the 35, 40-yard line. I have no idea why that's been an issue for Indiana. That's only happened twice, so maybe that won't happen against Louisville. And also, Indiana ran to the punter one time in the Indiana State game, but that's something that they can clean up. That was them probably just being over-aggressive. But besides that, everything else about Indiana's special teams has been great. James Evans, the punter from New Zealand for Indiana, has been great because of the fact he's been booting 50 and 60-yard punts. Not every time, but he's done several. I mean, there was one where Indiana was like their own 35, and he booted all the way into the end zone for a touchback. So that's crazy. He's that good of a punter. He's a lot better than last year. And Indiana's got two quality kickers that have both hit field goals already this season. Chris Freeman and Nicholas Radicic, both of those kickers are really solid. And I think that whoever is kicking the field goals against Louisville will knock them in, unless they're like 55 yards. We haven't seen them hit a field goal like that yet, so I don't know if
I was about ready.
that. But they've hit around 35, 40 yards, so they've been solid. So I'm liking Indiana special teams. And obviously Lucas, he can run one back whenever. So I'm liking the special teams.
Yeah, I was about ready to ask you that. I was like, how's their kicking distance? Because that worries me. Because if Indiana obviously, gets in like 30, 33-yard extra point range, they should be able to kick that through, right? You haven't had any trouble with that?
Not really. I mean, I think the longest field goal, they hit like a 43, 44-yarder. So I would be pretty confident that one of the two kickers would knock it in. I mean, we haven't seen a 50-plus yet, but Indiana's had usually good kickers that can do it. They had Charles Campbell last year that, oddly enough, transferred to Tennessee. That was kind of a shock, but both of Indiana's kickers this year seem pretty solid. So I would be pretty confident that they can knock it in.
Now, looking at it from my perspective, obviously special teams means a lot because, like you said, the Jets and Bills, great point, especially if the kick gets wobbled and it lands in the wrong guy's hand. Obviously because the game plan, I don't think this is going to be a shock to anybody, but Jalen Lucas, stay away. Anybody else can take the kick, but Jalen Lucas, you stay away. We're going to try to kick it away from him. See, and that's the thing. For Louisville and our special teams, we have a great punter. He's an Aussie punter. He's a sophomore. He's actually a transfer. He was at a Division II team, and then he comes in and is like, oh, this guy can kick. Obviously, punt return, kick returns. We don't have very many. Jamari Thrash likes to return both. He's been pretty good. He doesn't fumble very much. Obviously, we've only seen him in 2 games because he's just added, but he's dynamic. He can create some room. Like, he's not just a guy that you need to worry about when it comes to receiving. If you give him room in the punt game or he gets enough blocking on kicking, he could take it to the house. He almost took one back against Georgia Tech, a punt return. He took it back like 60 yards, but the punter shoved him out at the last second. But it's one of those things, it's like, obviously most of the time special teams does their job, but there's always that one rare instance where it doesn't quite do that, where someone breaks free and it's like, oh no, here we go. And that could turn a tide from a game completely. And obviously, a big thing to point out with Indiana is blocked field goals. They blocked a couple last year. And, they've mentioned it on the broadcast how Indiana likes to do that. And that's what kind of scares me because our kicker, he gets a little shaky. Obviously, he's got a good leg to him. But the thing is, he gets his confidence rattled. I remember last year he missed a 26-yarder. Wasn't his fault. Bad snap. Just couldn't get the laces down. And then he missed 2 kicks and it cost us the game. I believe it was the BC game. And it's one of those things, if Indiana could create enough pressure and we can miss some of these field goals and not get points, that could cause a lot of things to happen. Because, like with Clemson and Duke, you made a great mention on the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers. Great YouTube channel. You made a mention that if Clemson would have not had the field goal blocked and had the field goal missed, that it wouldn't have been 28-7. It would have been 28-27. A lot of that plays in the factor. People don't realize that. I mean, look at this past Sunday, Cowboys Giants. Obviously, the Cowboys get the blocked punt return, touchdown. Giants go down 6-0 just like that. That's why it's very important to point out that special teams can change a lot in a game. Because what if it's 13-0 Indiana and then we block your all's field goal and take it back to the house? Then momentum flips our way. And it's one of those things, transitioning to this next question, the turnover battle. Jeffrey, are you confident that when you need it the most, that your defense is going to come up with a turnover or special teams is going to get a blocked field goal? Do you think Indiana can win the turnover battle, and how do you think they can get it done?
I mean, it's a great question because Indiana, back when they were really good in 2019 and 2020, were great at getting turnovers. They were wreaking havoc all over the Big Ten, even against Ohio State. In that game in 2020, they forced Justin Fields for like 3 picks. It was insane how good Indiana's defense was at creating turnovers. They actually led the Big Ten that year in creating turnovers. But in 2021, 2022, their turnover game was not as good. They were not wreaking havoc like before, and a lot of teams were finding it really easy against Indiana's defense. That doesn't look like the case this year. It looks like more of a reversal back to the 2019-2020 defenses. Indiana was able to pick off Kyle McCord in the Ohio State game, and they were able to pick off the Indiana State quarterback as well. So Indiana's defense looks like that they're getting much better in that regard at forcing turnovers. Maybe they can get Plummer to throw a pick or two. Maybe they can force a fumble as well. I just feel like Indiana's defense overall is much better than the last couple years. The transfers that they've added have really helped in that regard. I would have to say I think I am pretty confident. I think Indiana's defense can get a timely stop if needed, especially if they force the right pressure at the right moment. I think they can force Louisville into a couple mistakes. And to answer the special teams question, I think both teams have good special teams, but I do think I would be a bit more confident in Indiana's special teams than Louisville's by a little bit. I just feel like Indiana has a lot more dynamic players all over the special team, punter, kicker, and kick and punt return than Louisville, just by a little bit. But on the turnover battle, I am confident that Indiana will be able to force the turnover. Will they win the turnover battle is a whole different question because of the fact Taven Jackson can make a couple mistakes as well. He has not turned the ball over yet as a quarterback, but he hasn't really been given a chance to. Against Ohio State, Indiana played really conservative. They would not really allow Taven Jackson to put the ball in harm's way. Against Indiana State, he threw the ball over the yard, but that was against an FCS opponent. So this is the first test that Taven Jackson is going to have against a really good opponent where he's going to be putting the ball possibly in harm's way. Louisville could win the turnover battle here, especially if Taven Jackson makes a couple mistakes. Jalen Lucas did fumble as well against Indiana State. And that fumble, gave Indiana State the only points they had on a scoop and score. Lucas is usually sure-handed. It was just a slight error in that regard. Even B. John Robinson had that classic fumble in the Texas Tech game, and he was always sure-handed. So everyone can have a mistake. But I do think that the turnover battle is going to be tight. I would argue Indiana could win it because I feel like Plummer might throw a pick or two in this game, but we'll see. But I think Indiana will win the special teams, and they have a good shot to win the turnover battle.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the special teams battle, Indiana more than likely I think has the better special team, especially with Jalen Lucas, who is, we keep bringing him up. He's going to be the ultimate determining factor. Heck with the head coaches and quarterbacks. Just give him the ball and just get out of the way. Let him handle it. Same with Jamari Thrash on our side. Just give him the ball, get out of the way, and whoever gets stopped first loses. But all kidding aside, though, I think Indiana has the better special teams. Like you said, not by a lot. It's close, but I think it's just a little bit better. Now, the turnover pattern. Here's an interesting stat. Louisville last year was second in the nation in turnovers created, and they were number one in sacks. We were second and first. And I think, honestly, our defense is going to do the same thing again. I think we're going to create havoc. And I think, me personally, I feel like our defensive line, yes, we did lose a lot to the NFL draft. It has been showing. But you got to remember, Indiana's offensive line is not the Indiana offensive line of old. You know, Obviously, ask Michael Penix. He'll tell you. I'm sorry, Indiana fans. I know that hurts you, but, it's just one of those things. It's some things how it happened. And I think, the guys I mentioned, Ashton Gill, Desmond Tell. Desmond Tell was the guy who forced the fumble against Haynes King. I think we could get it by sacking Taven. I think he might be a little gun shy to start. And when you're playing a good defensive line like ours, that could get you beat a lot of times. And if he's gun shy and doesn't want to take off like he should, and we get sacked and he starts fumbling or tries to throw it to Lucas and he's double covered and can go pick six back to the house. But also, I look at it from the reverse side of it. Like you said, Plummer's been prone to make his mistakes too. I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to have the red colored glasses on. That's obviously one of those things you got to look out for. Both quarterbacks are prone to make mistakes. Ultimately, it's going to come down to whose defensive line creates the most pressure, because the old saying is championships win defense. Well, I was always told and always taught that you can have the best corners and safeties all you want, but if you don't have a defensive line to get to the quarterback, eventually they're just going to get beat. They're going to end up giving it up. You got to have a D line to go with it. And I think Louisville, I think we have just a better D line than Indiana does. But like I mentioned, Aaron Casey can wreck a game all by himself. He did against Ohio State. He basically put the defense on his back, created some turnovers. And I think, honestly, the turnover battle, I think it's 60-40 in favor of Louisville right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if y'all force Plummer, being Indiana, into a couple mistakes. The question is, can our defense make sure those don't turn into touchdowns and keep them at field goals? Because when you turn the ball over and it goes to touchdowns, that's when it starts to get out of hand. And that's another interesting question. Are you confident if Taven is turnover prone? Are you confident that you'll be able to keep us off the board for 7 and just keep us to 3?
It's a good question. I mean, it depends on where the turnover is. I mean, if Taven Jackson throws a pick, like, at his own goal line, so he's like at the 1 and he throws it to around like the 10-yard line, a pick, and then Indiana gets a tackle and they're at the 10-yard line, they're probably going to punch it in. The Cardinals will. But if it's like at the other end of the field and Taven Jackson, he throws it on like the Louisville 30-yard line and there's a pick, I think Indiana can hold for a field goal or possibly no points at all. It really depends on where the turnovers occur. It's kind of like to reference the Bills-Jets again. You look at Josh Allen, that one pick he threw where it was like 65 yards down the field. It was essentially a punt. Like, that wasn't as costly as some of those other picks that were, in better field position for the Jets. So it's a big thing on where the turnovers occur. And obviously we have no idea if there's even going to be turnovers, and if there are, where they're going to occur. But where they do occur plays a massive role in whether there's going to be points scored off of those turnovers.
Yes, I agree 100%. Now, time for the big reveal. Our final score, predictions, and final thoughts, and all that. So, without further ado, we'll start with mine. No shock here. I predict 30-17. We're leaving Indy with a dub, and we're going back home to play BC unbeaten. Now, Jeffrey, go ahead and reveal yours, and then we will both explain why we believe our teams, or who knows, maybe why you think Louisville will win. Take it away.
Now, I mean, to your score prediction, it makes sense. I do feel like that Louisville has a good chance to win by this much. They're favored by 10, so a 13-point win would not be crazy. Again, they have a little bit more talent all around, even though the talent gap is close. But for me, I'm going with Indiana to beat Louisville 28-24. This is not a homer pick. I legitimately believe Indiana has a shot here. It's in Indianapolis. It is a neutral site. but I do feel like the crowd will be about 50-50. Maybe it leans a bit more Indiana because they're closer. There is a lot of Indiana alumni in Indianapolis that I think will show out for this game, and I think that's going to help out the Hoosiers. Louisville's going to have to travel a bit further, not too significant, but still makes a bit of a difference. And I think that Indiana defense is going to play really hard in this game. They're going to force Plummer into a couple mistakes that might be really costly. Lucas is going to be an X factor. I feel like he's going to have a lot of massive plays. And the kick return game, the punt return game, maybe catch some balls in the backfield and go. I think that's going to make a difference. And as long as Taven Jackson does not throw more than one pick, even if he throws one, I think they can still win, but they can't have any more turnovers than that. As long as he throws for about 250 yards, maybe a couple touchdowns, one pick, and then Lucas has a lot on the ground. Indiana's got a lot of good running backs. They've got 3 running backs that are solid. Christian Turner, Josh Henderson are solid as well. I think Indiana has enough here to possibly spring an upset because they are a 10-point underdog and win 28-24.
Now, before I give my take on mine real fast, yours is not too bad. I mean, obviously, me being a Louisville fan, obviously, if this was basketball, I would have a little more competitive about it because at basketball, you always want to beat Indiana because they're the pride and joy of their state. But football, if y'all beat us, I won't be too mad, especially it being you, Jeffrey. I'll let you have it, but this is not a bad score. I could see it going this way, especially, Georgia Tech did the same thing, a lot of screen passes, running the ball, setting it up. If Indiana can replicate some of that formula, they could definitely spring an upset. But as far as how I see this thing going, I got us winning by 13 points, 2 scores. I think Juwan Jordan is going to have a big day. I think Indiana is going to be hard-pressed to stop the run. We're going to be shifting out backs. We got 3 different backs that can play, all different styles and formats. We've got Juwan, who's power. We've got McKenzie, who's more the speed of the group. We've got all different kinds that could kind of give Indiana different looks. And if Indiana starts stacking that box, Jamari Thrash is going to have a field day. And I think that's where the problems are going to start because they're going to be like, okay, we see what you want to do, Rom. You're just trying to get him comfy and get him going. And Tom Allen's like, let me go ahead and stack this box. And then Jeff Brom's like, thank you. Now I can throw the Thrash one-on-one with this freshman safety over here who has no clue what he's doing. And then it's 65 yards going the other way. And I feel like our defense is going to be able to create a couple takeaways. And I think, it's going to be something like 23-10, like 5 minutes to go. And then Indiana gets like a score. And then all of a sudden, Indiana has a little hope. And then Jamal Thrash says, let me take care of that, and takes it to the house on like a kick return. But I think overall this should be a fun game. Hopefully it's competitive. I don't want to see a 45-0 skunking either way. I would like for it to be somewhat of a game. But Jeffrey, any final thoughts and takeaways as we get ready for this once in a blue moon matchup that we rarely get in football?
I think it's going to be a great game. And like you said, once in a blue moon matchup makes it a lot cooler because you don't usually see this type of game. Indiana-Louisville has not played since the 80s. And obviously, there's been an announcement that Indiana-Louisville are not going to play in 2024 and 2025. So we got to take advantage of it while we have it. I hope it's a close game. I think it's going to be a close game. And obviously, Louisville could very well win. And if they do, like you said, no hard feelings at all. It's no big deal for me. I'd be very happy for you and Louisville if they were able to win. Definitely could see it happening. But I think Indiana's got a great chance as well. Both teams very similar in talent level. It's going to be a great atmosphere. And Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, great neutral site venue for both of these teams. And I think it's going to be one of the best games of week 3 in college football. I think it's going to be that good of a game.
Now, before we get on out of here, I have a little side quest I want to ask you. In terms of going into conference play, who do you think sets this up well? Do you think if we win, or whether it's you, Indiana, whether Louisville, Indiana win, who do you think sets them up well for conference play? Just looking at the way the schedules line up, Indiana's still got to play Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Illinois in there, Michigan State. Then you kind of look on our end of the spectrum. We've got Pitt. We've still got Notre Dame on the docket. Duke, who's no longer considered an easy game. Obviously we still got Kentucky, which as long as we beat Kentucky, I'm happy. But as far as this game goes, on this last note before we head out, who do you think, no matter who wins this game, whether it's Louisville or Indiana, how do you think it sets up conference play for the winner and the loser?
I feel like for Louisville, if they win this game, obviously it's going to set them up in very good position because, as you mentioned before, if Louisville wins, they could go 5-0 before they play Notre Dame, and that would be huge for them because they could possibly be ranked in that game. Who knows? It'd be a massive matchup. So it would probably help Louisville a lot if they win because it would really build their confidence that they're a solid team. They've got a fairly easy schedule. It isn't super easy, but they've got some sneaky games in there. But it would really set up Louisville to continue the win streak. But with Indiana, I mean, obviously they already lost to Ohio State, but if they can beat Louisville, and then they play Akron next week. Then they get into Big Ten play. They've got Maryland on the road. That's kind of a toss-up game. I kind of feel like for Indiana, again, this is a game they need to win more than Louisville because if they don't win this game, it's not like they're out of bowl contention, but it would make it a lot more difficult because all those teams that you rattled off, Michigan State, Illinois, all those teams, Michigan, Penn State, those are tough games, Wisconsin as well. So they probably would be well served to beat Louisville if they want to make a bowl. Whereas if Louisville, they don't win, it's going to hurt, their dreams to start 5-0, but it is not going to hurt their chances of making a bowl game more than likely. So it's going to help both teams in different ways. Louisville for that hot start and Indiana to maybe make a bowl game and help their season out a little bit more. But again, it's going to be a big win for both teams if they can get it.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. I couldn't agree more. But, on that quick point, I will say the Big Ten, you obviously I think is considered the better conference, so it would be more inclined if Indiana could get a win here because in the ACC, Clemson, for whatever reason, decided, we're not Clemson anymore. Florida State, I don't know if they're for real or not. Duke looks like they may be the class of it. Obviously North Carolina's there, one of your other teams on the docket, but both conferences have their weaknesses and their strengths. Both teams need a win, maybe Indiana a little bit more, but it's all going to be very interesting as we get this week. We got plenty of great stuff coming on both channels. I'd like to thank everybody for watching on both channels, whether you're watching on Jeffrey's or mine. And obviously, we'll be rooting for our teams, but there'll be no ill will no matter who wins. We're not going to call each other booger faces. But anywho, I'm glad you all have joined us tonight, or afternoon, whatever time you're watching, or morning if you're across the country. But hopefully you enjoyed this preview. I'm Sports Talk with Austin. That's Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports. Like, comment, subscribe to both. And we're out this thing.
Thanks for being here, everybody.